Hey tribe, Dawna here from Transformational Healing, and today we are going to talk about some safety guidelines and environmental tips and guidelines that you should follow when you are harvesting herbs in the field. So today I'm actually in downtown Albany, but if you look behind me, you see a beautiful field, and it is filled with all kinds of herbs. Would I harvest any of these herbs? Well, I guess that would depend on what happens when you look around me, because right now that looks like a gorgeous field, and you're like, why wouldn't you harvest herbs in that field? But I'm standing in a parking lot, and with the sun here it's gonna be a little difficult. Right behind me, skyscrapers, roads, buildings, a truck. So you want to be very careful about how close to roads you actually are when you harvest things. Now, technically, this is an older parking lot. No one's probably even driving it anymore. I'm probably the first person that's pulled in here in quite a while. So, I mean, if you were desperate and you really needed an herb right away, or if you needed an herb for magic right away, you might be able to pick something in this field, if you know they're not spraying it with pesticides. But if you're not familiar with the area, you also don't know that. So, guidelines that most people follow, they say, like, some people even say only 40, but 50 feet from the side of a road. I typically like to go about 200 feet from the side of the road. And I want to make sure that I'm not getting exhaust fumes and oils and all sorts of things like that on my plants. Why do I want my plants covered in lead and gasoline and other types of toxic fumes or things that have spilled on the side of the highway? I know that that is where the most luscious plants are. As I'm driving down the highway, I am always seeing everything I've been looking to collect, but I won't collect it there because it's not safe to collect it there. Now, if you can find places that are disturbed that are not that close to the road, those are perfect places for you to go. So I don't necessarily collect here. I just happened to remember that this field was here because I couldn't get out to a place to actually be collecting today for this video. So I also want to make sure that the places that I'm collecting things are not being sprayed with chemicals and pesticides and those sorts of things. You don't want to be ingesting that into your body. And certain plants will collect and store more of those things than other things will. You should also be aware of that even with your own home gardens. Are your neighbors putting chemicals on their lawns? That's kind of important to know. So, we also want to make sure that when we harvest, you only harvest, some people say, a third of what is there. My rule of thumb is that whatever I see, when I pick, there has to be enough of it. It has to not be an endangered plant. I have to 100% be certain that I am collecting the plant I think I am collecting. I use lots of ID books, lots of ID apps if I have any questions about things. And when I'm done harvesting, you can't even tell that I was there at all. Or by the next morning, you can't tell that I was there at all. Because say that I'm picking daisies and I'm looking and I'm picking daisies and just enough, and I might pick half the daisies that are open, but only if I see that there's hundreds more buds that are not open at all that day. There are very, very few things that I sell in the shop that I actually do still harvest on my own. And that's because of the bulk of all of you tribe members that are now purchasing things. It's not sustainable for me to be harvesting in any of the places where I know that things are for the products that you guys need for me to help you and serve you the best. So I now purchase almost everything organic from wholesalers. or if I can't find it organic, I get it as sustainably done as possible. So I do still collect black-eyed Susans, daisies, and crown vetch and climbing vetch when I can find it. And when I can't find it, you won't have it that year because they're not going to sell it in the shops or in the wholesale shops for me to buy. So if I can't find it, then we don't have it. So I always try my hardest to get whatever I can. So we stay away from roads. We make sure our species that we want is not vulnerable. We only take a little bit. The species has to propagate. The species has to be able to come back and grow back in that same place next year. It needs to be able to spread seeds. You have to be really careful about over-picking things, or you won't have anything left to harvest when you need it again. And you should always, personally for me, on a spiritual level, leave an offering when you're picking herbs. Talk to the plants. Mentally thank them. You're not expecting to hear a voice back. You're mentally putting out love and intention into those plants for them to give up their life for you to be able to do what you need to do. So thank them for that. Leave them a little bit of tobacco. Leave them a little bit of your hair when you're harvesting. There's lots of ways to go about that. You also want to make sure that you're not picking on private property. If you don't know who owns the property that you see something on that you want, you should probably find out, because it could be something of theirs that they're actually growing and waiting to harvest, and you're literally stealing it. And let's talk a little bit about time of day. You want to make sure, or type of day, you want to make sure that you always pick your herbs on a sunny day like this. But I wouldn't be picking this late in the evening unless it was something that I really, really needed. Typically, I do my picking earlier in the morning after the sun has dried all the plants out so they're not wet, but before you hit that really, really hot peak day sun and it has been able to dry out the plants some. So you want to pick them when they're dry, but not when they're brittle. So that's why I like to pick in the late morning on a very sunny day. And it's very important when you're picking to have separate bags or separate baskets for every type of thing that you are picking. You want to have them labeled. You want to know what it is. You want to know it's not poison. You want to be sure of what is in each of those bags. You want to dry them right away. And on Thursday, we are going to talk about all sorts of ways to dry the herbs that you might be picking. So, sometimes when you're thinking about what drying methods you have available to you will also affect how you are going to harvest those herbs. Are you going to pick the individual leaves or the individual buds, or do you need to take the whole plant because you can only hang? So, we're going to talk a little bit about that on Thursday. If you are looking for some herb IDs and some of the different videos that we've gone out in the field, check out the 3 spring wild weed walks and the 3 summer wild weed walks that we have done so far this year. And I hope that that will help you a little bit with your identification skills and see places that I would actually harvest, because that's where I've been IDing things. And like I said, I wouldn't necessarily harvest here unless I absolutely had to. So, many blessings, and I will see you on Thursday when we follow up with how to dry those herbs.